Over the past fortnight, I've caught both parts of Tony Kushner's Angels in America as part of the National Theatre of Great Britain's live screening of them. I thought this would make a really good opportunity to add another video in my series in which I look at some of the English language's greatest playwrights. Now, I will admit that prior to 2 weeks ago, I'd never read or seen any of Kushner's work before, and it was really nice to get to see this work live for the first time rather than go in having read it and therefore kind of knowing how it would play out. But the first part absolutely captivated me for the 6 days in between. I couldn't really stop thinking about it, and then the second part absolutely solidified to me the fact that Tony Kushner is one of the greatest living American playwrights. The amount that goes on in these plays and the detail with which they are written, as well as the mix of kind of very light, silly humour with deep philosophical inquest is masterful. If you've caught any of my other videos in this kind of line, you'll know that I usually like to approach the work of a playwright from a particular angle. And so today I wanted to look at Angels in America as epic theatre. Now, if you're not completely au fait with Brecht and Piscator's concept of the epic theatre, then fear not, I will kind of introduce certain terms through the video. So, with that in mind, here we go.
Does it make any difference that I might be one thing deep inside, so long as I have fought with everything I have to kill it?
So though Kushner has publicly stated his love for the work of Bertolt Brecht, I don't think that Angels in America necessarily comes across as epic theatre in the first instance. Though set in the dark days of the AIDS crisis in the 1980s, the magical realism and often flippant humour of the script, as well as characters appearing in each other's storylines, has the potential to chase any politics from the stage. We get the occasional joke, as well as later a whole storyline about Joe's republicanism, as well as Louis's occasional kind of Marxist riffs. And there is, of course, that very powerful address at the end of part 2, which is full of fear and hope and love and grief. However, it was often during some of the more surreal elements of part 2 where I found myself most connecting with the politics of the piece, and particularly its attack on this kind of fundamentalist Christian neoliberal establishment that was very prevalent during Reagan's time, and I think also is very relevant today, both with American politics and different political movements across the world. In the more colloquial use of the word, there are a few plays that deserve the term epic more than Angels in America. I mean, it's close to 8 hours long, both parts. But this isn't necessarily what Brecht and Piscator, the two German theatre directors who developed this concept of the epic theatre, meant by the term. Brecht in fact preferred the term dialectical theatre. He wanted a theatre that excavated the underlying power structures beneath the topsoil of civic society. The theatre both directors sought was one of connectedness. They wanted to see not just middle and upper class characters in suburban bubbles worrying about their interpersonal worries, but a theatre that really exposed the power and politics at play in society. Now instantly, a play about the AIDS crisis is going to throw up all kinds of political questions. Part of the storyline is the slow progress of the AZT trials, in which government bureaucracy is slowing up these drug trials, and we see the very human consequences of that on the stage. But further to this, I think it's the inclusion of the character of Roy Cohn, a real-life lawyer who worked both for Reagan and also for Donald Trump, that gives the play both a slight foothold in reality to balance out those elements of magical realism, but also allows the play to have a real cutting edge into the hypocrisy of that Reaganite moralist politics. Now, another key part of the epic theatre is the act of historicisation. Often in Brecht's plays, he examines something that is happening in his contemporary lifetime by taking a look at a period in history. There are a number of ways in which history is weaved through the dramaturgy of Angels in America. We get this wonderful comic notion of Prior Walter's ancestors ancestors. All of his namesakes too have lived through different ages of plague. And it's worth saying that to have framed the AIDS epidemic in such terms in the early 1990s when the plays premiered would have been far more controversial than it is today. Kushner uses this device then to put the AIDS crisis alongside other kinds of uncompromising cross-continental epidemics. But I think too that the inclusion of this motif of angels also invites us to think of the play not as part of just the 1980s or even the 20th century, but as part of a much broader history. Whenever we're asked to think in these kind of spiritual terms, I think we take a step back kind of with history. And so Kushner uses this device to present the 1980s as a very critical moment in the history of the country of America. And this leads us to talk about moralizing. Brecht was very clear that if the epic theatre was going to allow itself to explore deep political themes, it would also have to be engaging and entertaining so that people would want to go to it. Part of this is to accept that most people think morally rather than logically about politics. Characters such as Mother Courage, Grusha in Caucasian Chalk Circle, and Polly Peachum in the Threepenny Opera are all characters who are bound by human emotion, not by some broad political scheme. And this is the same in Angels in America. Although we do get discourses of politics primarily within the storylines of Joe and of Roy Cohn, primarily we see the effects of the AIDS crisis in the lives of Pryor and Louis and Belize and all their unseen friends who are victims of this plague. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Verkümdungs effect, this central notion to the epic theatre, this distancing effect. Brecht never wanted his actors to be fully absorbed in the fictional world of his plays. He wanted us to always be aware that we were watching a piece of theatre and a piece of fiction. This was particularly clear in the design and some of the practicalities of Marianne Elliott's production for the National Theatre, but it is also something that is stipulated in the playtext by Tony Kushner. But what was most interesting for me was to think about the use of magical realism as a kind of dramaturgical V-effect. The visitations by the angel throughout the two plays both draw us in with their theatricality, but also push us away with Walter's often silly terrifiedness at the fact that these angels are here. He's often almost flippant at the fact that there is a huge angel in his hospital room with him. And I think, yes, this magical realism does help Kushner to explore themes of religion and spirituality and history. But I think it also allows us to remember that everything that happens on stage is in some ways pretend. The idea of this from Brecht's point of view is that things don't have to end the way that they do necessarily within a play, that we have the agency to shift how things might play out. Now there is far more I could have and would have liked to have said in this video. I particularly like the way that Kushner uses Mormonism to explore the kind of very foundations of American society and to examine the postmodern American mindset. The sometimes warm, sometimes heartbreaking world of Angels in America has beneath its surface a very political barb, and I think it bears thinking about in terms of the epic theatre of Brecht and Piscator, both in how it relates to that former work, but also for how it suggests how we might move forward with forms of political theatre in the future. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought if you saw Angels in America down below in the comments. I had a great time, I really loved it. I will have a new video soon, I'm sure. If you'd like to see it, then please subscribe. If you'd like this video, then give it a thumbs up. Thank you very much for watching and have a great week.